HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's show is sponsored by Bob's Red Mill. With natural foods, they support organic, vegan, paleo, and gluten-free lifestyles. Learn more about their commitment to good food for all at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to Heritage Radio Network. We are a member-supported, nonprofit food radio station. That means that every single thing we do, from broadcasting 35 weekly shows for free to bringing you exclusive content from sold-out food events across the country, to offering scholarships to high school students, is only possible thanks to the support of our loyal members. And we want you to join the club. Become a member during our 2017 summer drive to get access to sweet swag and pledge your support to the world's only food radio station. Visit heritageradionetwork.org/donate to become a member now.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Jeff Taylor, wine director of North End Grill in Lower Manhattan. We'll talk to Jeff about the New York wine scene. We'll talk to him about somms. We'll talk to him about what to drink with smoke, fire, wood, and we'll talk about some other stuff too. We'll taste a vintage Bordeaux for our weekly wine sip, and Jeff also brought in a grower champagne, which we'll taste too. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Jeff Taylor is the wine director of North End Grill in Battery Park in Manhattan, part of Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group. Jeff has received awards like the Wine and Spirits Best New Sommelier, among others. And he's also been part of some of the best restaurants in New York and around the country, including 11 Madison Park, Masa, and Felidia, to name a few, and we'll get into that. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Glad to finally get you on.
Definitely.
You have a pretty interesting background in the business. You've touched a lot of places. So what I want you to do is just give us a little context and background. Tell us about your journey in life and in wine that got you to your present point today, which is at the North End Grill, which
Sure.
we'll talk about too.
Yeah, definitely. So my father worked for the airlines, and I was born in Boston, but...
Are you a Pats fan?
I'm a football fan.
Okay.
I'm not a Belichick fan.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was born in Boston, and we moved around a lot, almost like army brats, until I was about 16 years old, and then we moved over to London, England, and I finished high school there. Went to an American system
Why
school.
London? Was that
my father was a general manager at Heathrow.
Okay.
and then managing director for Europe later on for American Airlines. So I went to an American system high school there, and then did a year of college in an American system as well. But my love back then, and from the time I was a little kid, was acting. And London was a great place for that. Really just getting immersed in the culture there, seeing Shakespeare every night, going to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. This summer I graduated from high school on a 2-month...
They have their own Broadway there.
the West End, yeah. And that was my number one passion. By chance, where we were living, our next-door neighbor was a couple that the wife was a wonderful chef, and the husband was an amazing wine collector. And they loved to entertain. So needless to say, here I was, a 16, 17-year-old kid, drinking beer at the pub with my friends, but maybe once a month or so on a Sunday, we would go over to their house for dinner.
And they would bring the kid over?
And my younger brother. And, we would go over there, and, Pat would have made this amazing, Burgundy-centric meal, and George would have gone down to the cellar, and I was drinking, now I know what they were, but back then I just, this is kind of interesting red wine. Right. Oh, it's Pinot Noir. Oh, cool. But it was
God knows what you were drinking.
Roumier,
right?
and all these great DRCs and all this great Burgundy, white and red. And then the next month we'd go, and it would be white truffle season, and it would be Conterno Barolo with risotto with white truffles. And
it's crazy.
I knew at the time I was experiencing something very special, but it wasn't until a little later where I realized how special that was and what an education I was getting at such a young age. I mean, living in Europe alone really blossomed that. Went from a family that really didn't drink wine at the table to moving to London, where it was customary to have wine at the table, whether it was dinner or lunch, Sunday brunch, whatever it might have been. And for whatever reason, I did my year of college, and then I decided I needed to get back to the States, and I ended up going to NYU, to Tisch School of the Arts, majored in acting, got a BFA in acting.
Did you come to New York because of NYU?
Yeah.
Or you?
Yeah, I had auditioned for a couple of different programs, DePaul in Chicago, Emerson in Boston, Carnegie Mellon in Pennsylvania,
right.
and then NYU. And I luckily got into all the programs, but when I thought about it, well, New York's where I want to be. So, if you're going to make it there, you're going to make it anywhere, right? So I ended up going to NYU and graduated. And like any good actor, I started to work in restaurants.
Right.
And you're an actor? Well,
what do you call an actor without a job? Homeless. So at least you were working in a restaurant.
No, a waiter.
A waiter, right?
Exactly. And by chance, this is in the late 90s, my first real restaurant job was at Gramercy Tavern. So
incredible.
That was my first experience.
I mean, you hit the top out of the chute.
And, that was a restaurant, and
that was nice. So let's set up the timeline.
Yeah.
That was 1997.
1997, yes.
But let me back up, because I did a little research.
Sure.
You spent many years in acting and kind of packed it in. Right? Is it fair to say? Or eventually shifted?
I eventually shifted.
Okay.
And that was...
So 1997 is sort of a point where you began.
Yeah, there's about a 10-year period from 97 to 07 where I tried to act.
Okay.
I tried to make it. And all the while I was working at restaurants. Case in point, though, I started at Gramercy, and I was only there for literally 3 or 4 months. And
Doing what?
I was a back waiter, a busboy.
Was Paul Greco there?
Paul Greco was there. He was a captain at the time.
Right.
Tom Colicchio was the chef. Nick Matone was the GM.
Good crew.
Steve Olson was the beverage director, or the wine director then.
Good crew.
And I was really green. I didn't know how to clear plates correctly. I didn't know how to mise. I didn't,
That's a service-centric place.
And but Paul Greco, actually, and it's funny you mention him, really kind of took me under his wing. And long story short, I ended up getting cast in a play, and I went to my GM, Nick Matone, and I was like, so I'm going to need this Thursday, Friday off for rehearsals. And he's like, no, kid, this isn't that kind of restaurant. And I said, oh, okay. But Paul pulled me aside and he said, hey, I know you want to try this acting thing, and go ahead and do that. Good luck. But you're what Danny calls a 51%er, and I had no idea what that was. The book hadn't been written yet. And he said, if ever you want to make restaurants your life, you can't do anything better than a Danny Meyer restaurant. So I ended up working at a no-name restaurant for a number of years while I was pursuing acting.
So you left there because you
I left there. I
pursued
got
the
cast. I
acting
got
thing.
cast in a play.
And of course, we know that wasn't the type of place to moonlight.
That was not the place. But I ended up. I spent a lot of time at a place called Bryant Park Grill, which is behind the New York Public Library,
Right.
and it's kind of a
Indoor,
Teflon,
outdoor, right.
a Teflon of a restaurant. No matter how bad the food is, people still go
Right,
because the
like
locale.
Tavern on the Green.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
But I was a big fish in a small pond there. Ended up being a captain of probably hundreds of weddings over the time I was there. But anytime I got cast in a play or did a show or TV or whatever, I was able to just sub out all my shifts. I kept my health insurance. It was really a good situation I was in. But then I guess it was in 2004 I really started to kind of get bummed out with the acting thing, and I kept, seeing the same actors at the same calls, and 1 in 100 shot, and the joke was Philip Seymour Hoffman was stealing all my work at the time, and I still get that.
What's your excuse now?
But then 2004, by chance, a guy that I was working with at Bryant Park Grill had a friend that was opening Masa as kind of the lead bartender.
That was when Time Warner was
Time
opening.
Warner was just opening.
That was one of the
and all that.
high-profile restaurants.
Sure.
Right?
So this is 2004, and Masa had obviously gotten a lot of press because it was going to be this $350 a head dinner, and here I was going, oh my God, we're going to make $400, $500 a night, and so it was my buddy and I for a couple of weeks before we even saw a paycheck, and then there was a very unfortunate moment where we had to talk to Masa about our paycheck and explain what the tip pool was in New York, and he had come from, L.A., and it was a very small restaurant that he had in L.A., in Beverly Hills, and he didn't really have to tip anyone out besides his 2 sous chefs, and there was, I think, a kind of a helper that, brought Oshibori towels and changed soy sauce and stuff like that. So...
Out the door?
Well, not out the door yet, but I moved over to the bar masa side, which was a little bit more casual, and it was just 2 waiters a night, 20 deuces, or 22 tops, or whatever you want to call it. And, we made a small killing there. And I did learn a lot, and that's where it was interesting. Not only did I start to learn about sake, but it was really a kind of a trophy wine list for, these elite people that were coming to eat.
It had to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with that kind of dinner, you had to have those kind of offerings.
You had all the great Burgundies, all the great first growths of Bordeaux, and and lots of champagne, obviously.
Right.
Regardless, whatever happened, there was no health insurance at the time. I was kind of just moonlighting there, still being at Bryant Park, and then cut to 2005. I start with the Battalion Bastianich group. They had a small little French restaurant called Bistro du Vent on 43rd in the theater district.
Right, I remember.
And on the other side of Esca.
Right.
And there, the GM was a gentleman named Jeremy Noy, who's now the CEO of Morel, and a young guy named Alex Munoz, who is now big up in the David Chang empire. And it was an all-French wine list, 300, 400 selections, and that's really where the spark started for me again, and going back to that time in London and Europe, and really being fascinated by these wines. And Jeremy and Alex were great with kind of helping me along. And one day we drink Chinon, and the next day we drink Provence, and then we explore Burgundy or Bordeaux. And I really got my teeth kind of cut my teeth rather on French wine there. And then I enrolled in the American Sommelier Association 24-week, was called the V&V, Viticulture and Vinification class. A guy named Andrew Bell took
Still
that.
doing it, Andrew, right?
Still is, yeah, still doing it. And then cut to end of 2006, and I was really I was still kind of moonlighting at Bryant Park, keeping my health insurance there, and but really unhappy with acting, and just getting kind of miserable at Bryant Park because I was a foodie, and yet I wasn't really proud of where I was working.
Didn't match up to your sensibilities.
And the wine list was in shambles and
Right.
all that. So by chance, I had heard that Daniel Hume had. I'd always kept up to date on chefs, and
Daniel Hume is the chef of 11 Madison.
correct, yes, and I was never a starving actor. I always ate out. My entire paycheck went back into eating when I was in my 20s in New York.
Professional eater.
There you go. And long story short, I had heard that he had moved from San Francisco from Campton Place, and he had taken over 11 Madison Park, which was a restaurant I had enjoyed before when Carrie Heffernan was the chef, the opening chef. And so I kind of kept an eye on it. And then January of 2007, they got they got a wonderful 3-star review at the time from the Times. And I just happened to go in there I was down in the neighborhood, and I happened to go in there for a lunch and sat at the bar by myself. They had a 5-course tasting menu with pairings. The whole thing cost about $110 all in. And it was a great lunch, a great lunch. And I sat there, and Leo Robachek, who's now the bar director for all of Made Nice, was the bartender, the daytime bartender. And there was this Irish guy, Jerry, who was a bartender at Bistro Devant 2 years before. And then the bar manager was a guy named Sam Lipp, who is now managing partner of Union Square Cafe. Right. So if the stars were aligned, I definitely thought they were that day. And Sam happened to approach me, and he said, "Hey, where are you working? You still working at the park?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, we're doing really cool things here, and we're looking for people like you, people that have experience, people that know how to deal with guests and can teach younger staff." And so I had this lunch, and we kept in contact. And I said, "Well, I've really kind of committed myself to the park through the summer, but come Labor Day, I'll call you." And sure enough, I started right after mid-September of 2007.
As
well, I wanted to be a sommelier. I went in hoping I was going to be a sommelier, and then Will Guidera very quickly shot me down and said, "Oh, you don't understand. Everyone here is going to start as a food runner." And I knew that Per Se had started like that, and we had a long talk, and I was 31 years old at the time, and he's like, "I know you have 10 years, plus."
31-year-old food runner.
Yeah, but it was very humbling, and I said, "Okay," and he said, "No, don't worry, you're not going to be a food runner for long because we have plans for you, and we think you're captain material, but in order to go, you have to go through all the hurdles." So I went from food runner to front waiter, and then finally to captain in, I guess, probably January of 2008. Still wasn't a sommelier. The joke is John Reagan, who was the wine director at the time, didn't even know who I was, but he did. But he was very, very kind to me, and he allowed me to, we did late night tastings, and at lineup I got to talk freely about the wine, and he could tell I was very passionate about it. And
right.
I would bother him incessantly about new wines by the glass,
right.
And when I was a captain, the Somms loved having me if I was in their station, because I would do all the work. I wanted to pour all the pairings. I wanted to sell the next bottle of wine and all that. And then in 2009, August of 2009, we got a 4-star review from Frank Bruni, one of his last reviews before he retired from the Post. And literally overnight, it changed our lives. We went from that Tuesday night, I'll never forget, we cut down to 3 captains. There was 2 Somms on the floor. There was 48, 52 something covers, and 8 o'clock at night that review came out, and the next day
that was the end
we were
of
at
that.
200. The phones just kept ringing
till today.
Right. Always, yeah. And that was a great ride, and we jumped through a lot of different hoops and kind of changed our approach a couple of different times. I never forget, I think it was about 2010. Maybe 2011, we had kind of rode this high of 4 stars with the menu that we had, and then Will and Chef decided to change it all, and we ended up doing this, what we call the grid, which was a 16-word menu that incorporated a tasting menu into these 4 ingredients that you chose, and then subsequently we did the all New York menu and blah blah blah. But
so when do you become a Somm?
2009, right after the review, we and this was really John Reagan's doing. We changed the floor plan of how we did staffing. So we went from 5 captains and 3 sommeliers to 4 captains, 4 sommeliers, 4 front waiters, and 4 back waiters. So you literally had 4 teams of 4, 16 people in that dining room.
So they needed a som.
They needed a som. So I got the call to the show, and I never looked back.
And you eventually became the head som, right?
Eventually became the head som. So in about 2011, late 2011, early 2012, Danny and Union Square Hospitality Group sold the restaurant to Will and Chef and with that, John Reagan decided to go to Union Square Hospitality Group and become the corporate wine director, and a guy named Dustin Wilson came in to be the wine director, who I hadn't met him yet, but we had some mutual friends in common, and I was in the court at the time, and so I knew of him, and I knew he had just passed his masters.
We had Dustin on the show.
Yeah, oh cool.
He talked a little about that.
Yeah, and so Dustin got there, and he had come from San Francisco from RN74, and he had never really done fine dining at that level, and we were really kind of inseparable for a long time because I literally taught him position numbers and table numbers and how to approach the table and who all these regulars were, and introducing him to people and all that, and likewise he taught me a lot. But it became clear that the previous head sommelier, a woman named Christine Bigetta, was leaving to go to San Francisco, actually, to go to Quince. And so they needed a new head sommelier. And then I guess it was at 11 or 12 that I was promoted to head sommelier, and was there as head sommelier until, March of 2014, when I left there to kind of go to my extended 11 Madison Park family in Betony.
Right. So let's finish up quickly because I want to get to... So 2014, you leave 11 Madison.
I go to Betony.
Truly one of the great places. Yep. You go to Betony on 57th. Incredible
57th.
Space. A bunch of EMP alumni, right?
Eamon, Bryce Schumann, the chef. Rebecca Isabel was the pastry chef at the time.
Highly touted, beautiful room, but it closed.
It closed, yeah.
Why?
And that,
was it the lease? Or?
It wasn't the lease.
Business?
To put it... kind of
nicely or bluntly.
Nicely, we had a Russian ownership group that I don't think fully got what we were trying to do.
Those damn Russians,
yeah,
man.
They keep meddling.
I'm going to do an investigation. I'll get back to it. All right, so that closes down, but you had a good run.
Yeah.
The Baccarat Hotel opens up.
So
you do a short stint.
I had done a short stint there, and that, not to... I had never done a hotel before, so they kind of came after me, and Shea Galanti was the chef who had been at Crew, and so people like Robert Bohr and Raj Vaida spoke highly of him, and for whatever reason, that restaurant just never took off, and the restaurant Chevalier actually closed. So
I remember that.
I knew the writing was on the wall.
Yeah,
and I kind of made an exit plan and a severance package,
and then you went to Felidia.
Well, when I got out in... This must have been it was probably May of last year of 16.
A little over a year ago.
Yeah, a little over a year ago. I left because I knew the restaurant was closing, and I didn't really have anything. And Eric Hastings, who was then the corporate... not Eric Hastings. Jeff Porter, who was then still is the corporate kind of wine guy for B&B, called me and he said, "Hey man, have you thought about Felidia?" And I was like, "Felidia? Is that place still open?" I've never been there. Okay. I've always heard about it.
We know Lydia.
I know Lydia from TV.
Right.
And I always heard it was a great list, and for a long time in the 80s and 90s, it was a grand award-winning wine list from Spectator. And okay, so I took an interview with Lydia and Tanya Bastianich, her daughter, and there was this great Italian wine list, huge Italian wine list that was fun for me to sink my teeth in.
Right,
because I'd never done a
sort of French-centric.
Very French-centric, especially at 11 Madison.
Right.
And, we had Piedmont and Tuscany in 11 Madison, but, to get into the minutia of,
all the other stuff.
Umbria and all those other places at Felidia was quite cool. But for whatever reason, that's a restaurant that's, been doing its thing for 30-something years.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised you were there.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised
and it
you
was, whatever. It wasn't the right fit.
All right, so
and
then
I left actually in December of last year, and I thought maybe, I've never had a December off. Maybe I'll just go to my family in Texas and hang out with my brother and his son and daughter. And
that's it.
could have done that. And then it just happened to be that my good friend Caleb Ganser, who I was a som with at 11
Caleb's
Madison.
been on the show.
Yeah. He basically, in the span of me leaving Felidia and 2 days later, he was looking for a som for company. And I texted him. I said, I might know of someone. And he said, who? And I said, me. And he goes, really? I said, yeah, just if, can we maybe do something for a couple of months until I can find really the right next move for me? Because, the past 2 places I've been at, I kind of jumped into, and whatever reason, they weren't the right fit.
Now, Caleb is over at Compagnie
Du Vin Sur Naturel,
Naturel.
on Center Street.
Down on Center Street.
Yeah, and I'd been a
bar.
big fan of the space, and had been a guest for a long time.
But you were there for a short period of time. So
There
I
for
want to
about-
finish this up.
Yeah.
You were there how long?
About 4 months.
And then I would gather the
And then,
Union Square North End job.
Yes,
comes
so
up.
Mia Vanderwater, who was the wine director, who actually, oddly enough, went to be a floor sommelier at 11 Madison Park, where her husband, Andrew, also works.
Andrew Restello.
Yes, Restello.
So she went back to 11 Madison?
She went back to EMP.
She
And
leaves North End?
She leaves North End,
You
goes to
go in
EMP.
there to become the wine guy.
I get a phone call from John Reagan asking me if this could be a possibility. And
So you always had good relationships with the Union Square people?
I did.
Okay.
And that's, you never want to burn a bridge, because you never know
no.
when it's going to come
That
back.
company,
and help
too.
you. Yeah.
All right, so that brings you current. We'll talk about North End in a couple of minutes, but just let's chew on a few other things. So you get into the business in 97, at the lowest level, and it's 20 years already.
Yeah.
Talk to me about biggest changes you've seen, in wine and in restaurants, the whole scene in New
Sure,
York. I
sure.
mean, anything jump out at you?
I think you see fine dining as we know it is few and far between now. And you're seeing yes, 11 Madison Park is fine dining.
And Gramercy is considered
Yes,
a little more
yes,
stealthy
yes.
service.
But still, Gramercy Park is still a 3-star New York
Right.
Times restaurant. It's not a 4-star restaurant. EMP had to create the Nomad to make a more casual
Right.
vibe, and now they even have a more casual vibe with Made Nice, which is this fast casual
Right.
kind of
Took it to the next.
salad.
So
and
you're
sandwiches.
saying you'll see less of that.
I think you're seeing less of that, and I think you're seeing more.
Nobody's going to take the chances and risks to open
You're
up
right.
these temples.
I think you're seeing more. You're seeing people that are more comfortable. There doesn't have to be tablecloths on the table. I mean, look at for me, the mold is what Patrick did with Pearl and Ash. I mean, going from Guilt,
Right.
where he was wearing a suit, to
Good
being more of
example.
himself with jeans and Misfits T-shirts and his
Right.
tats out and all that.
Right. And a 1-star chef and a
Right.
killer wine
Having
list and
great wine list
right.
and great wine.
Your place
wine
too,
food.
which we'll talk.
Yeah,
North
yeah,
End sort of
definitely.
exemplifies that also. What else? What about wine? I mean, do you see what people are drinking changing? Or?
I think so. I think in the last 10 years, the role of the quote unquote som has been elevated to somewhat mythical status in some ways.
I always say that restaurants were temples,
Yeah.
chefs became rock stars, and then all of a sudden, som sort of
Yeah,
became
yeah.
like from road managers to rock stars.
Exactly.
Well, it's a good segue for my next question, but we'll get back to the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been a som, in the best market at the best places for a while. I mean, how do you define the role of a sommelier? I mean, we all know what it is, but what's your interpretation? Because you've done it at different level
Sure.
restaurants and for a while.
I think quite simply, the sommelier is a fancy French word for a wine steward or a wine waiter. So
A wine
Yeah.
wine waiter.
Yeah,
right.
you're in fact, when I first started at 11 Madison Park, we called them wine captains, not sommeliers.
Right.
But your goal or your job, I guess, is just like a captain or a waiter, is to guide the guest. While the captain or waiter will guide them in food choices, you're guiding them in wine choices to accompany that food. I think wine is the kind of the ultimate condiment, if you will, for food. And there's some guests that want to choose wine first and then the food second. There's some people that want to choose food first and then
Pair.
come up with a wine.
Right.
And it's really for me, it's a one size fits one.
So your
kind of thing.
approach is Because we had Bianca Bosker on.
Sure.
She wrote sort of the Kitchen Confidential of wine. And she talked about some people in some restaurants where there was a lot of hustle on the floor to sell bottles and move them around. And I still think keeping the customer's taste in mind.
Sure.
But the reality is not what you care about, but to try to get out of the customer. Is that still important?
For sure. For me, it's the utmost importance. I can go drink what I want to drink at the end of my shift or go to my friend's restaurant and open a bottle. When I'm working as a wine director, a sommelier, the key job is to listen to what the guest wants.
And lead them to
the right wine.
Right.
And each guest is different. I mean, there's many guests that don't know Cabernet from Merlot. And there's other guests that want to know,
so there's education.
The vintage variation of 90s Burgundy.
Right.
So, you have to listen to each one of those guests, and you kind of, make a educated guess of how much they know, and they'll kind of lead you. And, if it's someone that is very kind of green to wine, I'll say, what do you like to drink when you go to the wine shop? What's the bottle you buy?
Try to get some references.
Exactly. And then we take it from there. And, if you can maybe get a Chardonnay drinker and you can, once you gain their trust, maybe you can turn them on to like Chenin Blanc or something like that. Or, you got to
just listen. I'd ask you biggest changes in wine and restaurants. I don't know if you answered the wine thing, but in the last 20 years, wine, I wouldn't even use the word trends, but what evolutions or changes?
I think you're seeing, a lot of the old guard, it used to be a lot of Bordeaux and just California cab, right? And now you're seeing emerging, regions within France, even within California, different areas
Italy
of California.
Too.
Italy, Italy's crazy with it seems like every minute there's a new varietal.
Sicily, volcanic wines.
Yeah, so I think, and obviously the natural wine movement and all that.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Has been.
Do you drink natural wines? I know the restaurant. And we'll talk about their list.
Not intentionally. I mean, I don't.
What does that mean?
I don't drink a natural wine because it's a natural wine. I drink good wine, and if it happens to be natural, then
right. Because some people just drink natural wines because there are natural wine bars.
Right.
So wine is wine. If it's a good wine and it's natural, you're not going to drink.
Exactly, and I think just to get back to your question, you're finding areas where wine. There's great wine in every area, and there's crappy wine, whether that be France, Australia, South Africa, California, New York State, Virginia, Oregon, wherever there's good and bad wine,
right? And
it's good and bad winemaking,
right? Why are natural wines just totally void on some wine lists? I mean, is it they're not consistent? There's no ask or a huge market for it. It doesn't match certain restaurants. All of the above.
I think natural wine has its place, and Brooklyn has been a good borough for it.
Yeah, it's like the capital
for sure. For me, natural wine is. There's a lot of variables. You can't. I'll taste a natural wine one year and it'll be one thing, and then the next vintage it's a night and day wine.
Where with even a Bordeaux, or take California,
sure.
2011 was a crap year,
right.
2010 was good. So the vintage variation would be one thing. You're talking about more inconsistency.
You're talking about, yes, and
not
that's,
just vintage.
whether, and is it the sake of, making a natural wine for natural wine's sake, or is it because you really believe that you want to use a low sulfur kind of thing and all this? I'm not against it. I just, I don't actively pursue a natural wine because it's a natural wine.
I know that from following you and looking at the wine list and places you've been.
Sure.
Because, everybody gets to choose what they want. I've had a lot of people in here, Dustin, his store carries as much natural and as much traditional, whatever you want. All right, Jeff, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to cover two things. Sure. I want to talk a little about North End Grill because there's a lot going on there that relates to wine and all that, and you could help us. And then I want to subject you to our wine list because I want to get your take on a few things. And then we'll sneak in some wine on our weekly wine sip, but I think before we break, a good idea maybe to crack that champagne and drink it for the second half of the show.
Definitely.
And then we'll taste the Bordeaux I brought in.
Great.
So we're talking to Jeff Taylor. Jeff is the wine director at North End Grill downtown in Battery Park City. You're listening to The Grape Nation. We'll be back after these words.
Bob's Red Mill has been milling whole grain since 1978. One of the nice things about Bob's Red Mill is it's the only that I know of national supplier that's easily available for lots of interesting, hard-to-get grains and other seed products. So, before Bob's Red Mill became widely available, you couldn't go get something like quinoa very easily, or you couldn't go get spelt easily in small quantities. But now you go to any one of the huge number of stores that carry Bob's Red Mill, and you can get smaller amounts of these really interesting, fun things to play with. Learn more at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
But I've been known to wander straight and narrow. There's a very thin line. I can't seem to pick a side, so blame it on the whiskey and the wine. Whiskey and wine. Whiskey and wine. Tell my mother I'm fine. It's just a whiskey and wine.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Jeff Taylor. Jeff is the wine director at North End Grill. I want to talk to Jeff a little about North End Grill, the food, the wine list, some pairings, and all of that stuff. And I want to ask him to answer our wine list. So you're at North End Grill. North End Grill is part of Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality. I think you'd be a pretty good person to answer this. I'm curious, and I guess my listeners would be, what differentiates a Danny Meyer Union Square Hospitality restaurant to others? I mean, I know he employee first, he's got the playbook, he's written a book about it, but in your sight lines, what is it?
I think it's something he alludes to in his playbook is the 5 tenets, and it's really taking care of your team first, and
if they're really happy, then
right,
the
and
customer.
then taking care of the guest, and
I grew up in sales, and you used to take care of the customer first, and your employee wasn't that happy, and it would reflect.
But see, right here, I call it the C word. We don't like the customer word. They're guests. We're inviting them into our home, if you will. So the fact that we take care of each other, and I think USHG is probably one of the biggest restaurants that really tries to promote from within. And obviously I saw that in my time at 11 Madison, but you look at the people that have been at Gramercy Tavern forever, and things like that, and how they they started as a busboy, and now they're
so there's
GMs and
the employee, there's team building. I know you guys, the wine group, all of you were out in Napa.
Yeah, we were out in
Napa long ago.
Beginning of April.
Would you call that a team building group?
For sure, and that's how it was designed. And to be honest, I was still at company when I took that trip, but I had just accepted the job.
The job, right.
And
you weren't a stranger to most
and
of them.
I know a lot of those wine directors, but it was really John Reagan that said, "Hey, can you get away for 4 or 5 days, because it's going to be really important, not only for team building, but your program's going to have a huge Napa.
You're lucky the timing worked out. You could have started 2 months later.
That was fate intervening for sure.
All right, so let's talk about the wine list at North End Grill. It's very French and Cali centric, right? Why?
Well, first and foremost, it's like old school Cali and kind of French country centric, I would call it.
Okay.
With really a big emphasis on older vintages at fair prices. And you got to remember too,
French and California.
French and California,
Okay.
and you got to remember too that all those prices are already hospitality included as well.
Right.
So you
Forgot
don't
about
have to
that.
tip on top of it.
Quickly, Union Square hospitality restaurants have built the cost of the gratuity into the check.
Yes.
Is that a fair way to say
Exactly.
it? Right.
So, we have, it's called North End Grill. So obviously grill is the centerpiece here. It's a oak burning grill that has a lot of different meats, and we do grilled whole bronzino on the grill, shishito peppers. We have everything from hamburgers to steaks to, cuts, British cuts of lamb chops to, we just did pigeon the other day for a special group of guests.
So we can answer two questions in one shot.
Yeah.
One is, why is the list French in California? Because it complements
Eric Korsch's
the
food
food,
very well.
and the food is wood fire grilled, as you
Sure.
stated. Are those the best wines for smoky grilled wood type foods?
I think so, because
Among the best?
Yeah, I mean, well, France, you have a lot to play with. You really do. And for me, I'm a huge lover of Northern Rhone Syrah, so the smokiness of Syrah,
Right.
the smokiness of the meat
The
is a
meatiness of
no-brainer.
the-
Mourvedre from down in Provence and Bandol and places like that. Moving into older Bordeaux's, older Burgundies, all that has a place at North End. And then really kind of the old school California, really looking at 70s and 80s and 90s vintages from kind of maybe a couple of winemakers that are kind of off the radar now, but are for me in
that
the
was
in the
sort
cool
of
kids
the
club
infancy
still.
in California
Sure,
too, for the growth period.
For sure. And then, in the 70s and the early 80s, kind of pre-Parker, if you will, a lot of those wines are 13, 14% alcohol,
Right.
and it wasn't until they started chasing points that the alcohol rose.
Right, Bordeaux too, in a
yeah,
way,
for sure,
too.
for sure.
The
Yeah.
Parkerization,
Exactly.
as Alice Firing called it last
Exactly.
week.
Indeed.
So, talk specifically. So let's talk. You got beautiful steaks and chops. You got them cooked over a wood fire. I mean, everybody eats steak. Everybody's grilling steak.
Sure,
Give
sure.
me your top 2-3 pairings for that. Cab. What else?
Yeah, definitely. Cabernet, so either Bordeaux or California there. One thing that I used to poo-poo a lot is Zinfandel. And
It's always been known as a barbecue wine.
I drank a lot of Zinfandel in the past 3 or 4 months I've been at
Tell
North
me what you're liking in Zinfandel.
I'm a little biased because I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of old Joseph Swan Zinfandel.
Okay, so Swan is one of the old guys.
we just had a 76 last week. On Monday I had an 83 Swan Zinfandel, and also Ridge. We just did a dinner with
Lighten
them a
Springs
few,
and all
at Geyserville as well.
Geyserville.
And I've been fortunate enough to have some younger Ridge as well as going back into the 80s, and obviously those are benchmark wines. So Zinfandel,
What about stuff like Turley?
Yeah, Turley. Yeah, Christina's a great friend of the restaurant. We have this awesome thing that we do almost once a month called Fire and Wine, where we have a visiting winemaker or a visiting chef, and so Christina.
Macari wines.
Yeah, we just had them last week. Yeah.
Gabby was on the show.
Yeah, cool.
You take any risks with any wine within the French, or do you got the old Zins, you got the old Cabs, you got. is there anything there that's?
There's some, there's interesting stuff. We did, speaking of Ridge, we have an old Mataro, which is Mourvedre, which is really, really cool. Like, snapshot of that old school kind of Cali style, 100% Mourvedre. We take a little bit of risk in France as well, and it's not just Bordeaux and the big names. It's going down into Provence and getting old Tempier and old Madre Gourinière and like Mas de Masgasac and stuff like that.
Right.
Kind of the country wines, I like to call them, of France.
Right. So this may be an incriminating question, but your overall personal wine preferences, and I guess it could apply to any time you go to a new restaurant. Currently, do they match the list that you're serving? I mean, are those your preferences and sensibilities, or you got to retrain, retaste, get up to speed? Because you said when you went to Felidia, you got a good dose of Italian, which helps.
Sure, definitely. What was great for me coming into North End Grill is I had a really good, hold on those French wines. California, we had a fairly decent list at 11 Madison.
Right.
But for me, it's been, the trip to Napa that you just alluded to, but also just getting to kind of study that period. And I think when I was a younger sommelier, I might have poo-pooed New World wine a little bit too much. And
Right.
And now I'm really excited. I think the main thing is, even in Bordeaux, is a lot of people are drinking those wines too young.
Right.
And, Bordeaux and California, they're chasing those points
People
and all
are
that.
impatient, yeah.
And, man, you wait 20, 25 years, and these California wines are awesome. They start to get these secondary flavor profiles and become
Right.
very food-friendly.
Which is true with other wines, too. But
Sure, well,
those
France,
are
yeah.
wines that
Yeah.
benefit from,
Yeah.
All right, we don't have a ton of time. We have 10 minutes or less to buzz through two things. Jeff brought in a Don Gruyere grower champagne, which we'll talk about in a minute or two during the weekly wine sip, and we're going to taste the Bordeaux. But before we get to that, help me buzz through this, Jeff.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you our weekly wine list questions and get me through all of these pretty quickly. What are you drinking now? I don't mean right there, but like you alluded, I've been drinking a lot of Zinfandels the last 3-4 months. Is that part of the answer? What else?
That's been part. Due to the heat, I tend to drink a lot of champagne in the summer.
Champagne, top of your list, is one of the great wines?
Oh, sure. For
Okay.
sure.
Underrated in people's minds as far as
I don't think,
and how they order?
I don't think underrated. I think a lot of people still think of champagne as something that's celebratory or
underutilized.
Underutilized.
Okay.
I think you can drink champagne every day.
Right. A lot of foods and matches.
Yeah. What else am I drinking?
So champagne's in. Give me one more.
Northern Rhone Syrah always.
Okay. And all that stuff is at North End Grill, right?
Yep.
Give me your favorite wine and food pairing. Something, you've been around a lot of food and wine. You declared yourself a foodie early on in the interview. What's the classic thing for Jeff? Not the classic.
I could easy, the easy one is probably oysters and champagne or something like that.
Okay,
I won't say
have
that.
to smack you.
I won't say that.
Okay.
I won't say that. One of my favorite things is actually young Saint-Joseph with like a bacon cheeseburger.
Good one.
Yeah,
like
smoky.
a 2014 pair going on.
Oh,
and,
any going on will
okay.
do. Yeah.
All right, so that's a good one. So Saint Joseph, which is the Northern Rhone, which the grapes are predominantly Syrah, which is a very big meaty, goes great with the juicy hamburger meat and all. All right, great answer. Give me Jeff's favorite wine restaurant and our bar. People out there that are doing it right. The service, the selection, food. And I know, you've been around a lot.
Yeah. I guess I can give you one New York and one California.
Anywhere.
Cool.
Give me two New Yorks.
Okay. A little biased, but we just talked about it. Compagnie de Vin Naturel, I think, is
worthy of
one of the
mention.
funnest places to drink wine right now. Caleb has really curated a list that has something for everyone. And they have great glass pours. Chef Eric used to work with us at 11 Madison. So he's great food. It's just a cool vibe, great music. I love going there. I loved working there. I still think Rebelle in a lot of ways. Patrick's been so kind to me over the years, and he's become a mentor to me. And Daniel Eddy, I think, cooks great food, and it's a fun place to go. Obviously they have this Sunday brunch thing where it's half off bottles, and it's easy to
under $400
do and all that. Yeah. On the West Coast, when we were just in Napa, there's a restaurant called Press that
Kelly White, right?
who not only wrote a love letter to Napa in a book, but
Right.
she wrote a love letter to Napa in a wine list. And we just tore up that list in one night.
And Press is a steakhouse, pretty much.
Yeah, it's exactly.
But the wine list is
the wine list is all California,
right,
and
great.
All
She curates the crap out of it.
70s, 80s, just everything. It's a very impressive
All right,
list.
give me your favorite all-time wine. Is it a birth wine? I ask people, is it the wine you first got laid to? Is it your entree into Roman economy?
I have a lot of wines.
Doesn't have to be fancy.
I have a lot of wines that mean a lot to me.
Give me
because
the first one that comes to your mind.
One of the most important ones for me is it's going to sound pompous, but 1947 Huet Le Haut-Lieu Milieu Premiertrie. It's a wine that
Not a crazy expensive,
not a
fancy
crazy expensive wine. I mean, you can get
great example.
you can
of
get it
that
on a
area.
list for. I mean, we sold it at EMP for I think $900 or something like that. So in the span of things, it's a wine that's now 70, 80 years old or whatever.
70, because a
70
friend
years
of
old.
mine called me
Yeah.
and said, a buddy of mine's turning 70.
Yeah.
I need to find a wine from 1947.
Yeah, so
that's
but this wine for me is about the story. If you really know about Gaston Huet and know that he was a POW and he came back to Vouvray and it was war torn, and then in 1947, not only was it the best vintage of the 20th century in Vouvray, he was the mayor of Vouvray.
There you go.
That's the story right there.
So that's got good history.
That's a
We'll
great one.
post Jeff's answers on our Facebook page and all that, so if you didn't catch it. All right, last question, and then we'll taste a little wine. Best wine around $15, 15 to 20. I always say my oldest kid's going to a dinner party.
Right.
Everybody's cooking, wants to bring a couple of nice bottles, doesn't want to drop a ton of money.
Sure.
Give me a red, give me a white.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be, there's no region. Price.
White wine wise, Muscadet would be the easy way out, but I'm
That's
not going to
good.
do that for you. No,
No, but that's okay. So we'll put Muscadet as one. Give me your interesting.
The Trimbach wines I like a lot. The single
Alsace?
varietal. Alsace, yeah.
Alsace.
They're Riesling, straight Trimbach Riesling or Pinot Gris Sylvaner.
The value ones.
Are great value because, like anything in kind of the idea of Burgundy, you take producer first. So Trimbach is obviously a fantastic Alsatian producer.
Give
and
me a
those
red.
wines are great. Oh man,
Tougher?
I think one that I love to drink is Lapierre Raison Golo. It's basically a declassified.
Right. You're not
Beaujolais.
the first person who's recommended
It's
that.
his young vines from Morgon with a little. Yeah,
Is it
and
a
it's-
Gamay?
Yeah, 100% Gamay.
100% Gamay.
But just easy
So
to
it's
drink.
the maker is
Lapierre.
Lapierre and Raison, RAISIN.
Yes, raisins, and then Gaoulou.
Right.
Gaoulou.
I'll look it up. All right, those are good choices.
Yeah.
All right, and I'll post those.
Cool.
All right, we're going to wrap the show up with a little tasting. Jeff's an expert. So every week we taste a different wine on air. For our weekly wine sip this week, we're going to taste, I brought in a 2003 Chateau Leoville Poifery, French Bordeaux from the St. Julien region. I know it's a little boring to Jeff, but I just want to get his take on how a 03 is holding up. Pretty good vintage. And a pretty good wine, and also fairly highly rated. Plus, Jeff brought in a grower champagne, which is an estate-grown, smaller champagne compared to the bigger makers. So, Jeff, let's start quickly with the Bordeaux. 14 years old, still holding color.
Very much so.
All right, talk to me about the nose quickly.
You get a lot of those, roasted black fruit, blackberry,
Dark fruits, right?
Fruit, yeah.
The fruit's
leather,
pretty good on
tobacco.
this, right?
Yeah, it's great. Well, you got to remember 2003, a very warm vintage, so you're going to have a lot of that kind of roasted fruit quality to it.
Okay. So
Well, that's
03
smoked.
warm vintage, that's one of the characteristics.
Smoked kind of leather cigar box.
Smoke, yeah, cedary oak. I get a little licorice.
Needs a steak from North End Grill.
Yeah. All right, so let's throw it over the tongue. We'll talk mouthfeel first.
It's great.
Full body,
Full body.
kind of a
definitely.
mouth coating. Mm-hmm. Is this wine holding up?
Very much so, and I think because of the vintage, it's actually probably
voluptuous.
drinking well now versus when it was first released.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the palate. I think the black fruits
Yeah,
carry through,
definitely.
right?
Still
Blackcurrant,
decidedly
black cherry.
still obviously a very a very old world wine, but
Right.
it does have that fruit kind of forward quality because of the warm vintage, but that underlying kind of like black cherry, blackberry, leather, tobacco. It's pretty good.
The tannins are ripe, nice tannins.
Yeah,
right?
they're nice, but they're not overbearing.
In full disclosure, it's a 375 bottle. I had it lying around, and those tend to not hold up as well as, let's say, a Magnum. So it's showing well for even a small bottle.
Yeah.
All right. Then Jeff brought in a grower champagne, Don Gruyere, a non-vintage.
Non-vintage, but a lot of vintages in it.
So
let me give
explain
you the
what
quick
that is.
Let me give you the
Years
quick
of-
spiel. So Don Gruyere is a relatively new grower producer, and I say relatively new. They really started in 1986. They were selling fruit to negociants. And then recently, the husband and wife, Don and Gruyere, their son Adrian, who's all of 25, 26 years old, took over. And this is a bottling called Dans une première temps, which means kind of like the first step, if you will, or the first step. Yeah, take some more, please. It's good. This is actually a champagne we pour by the glass at North End Grill, and I was looking for a champagne that over-delivered. So it's $22 a glass, $88 a bottle.
That's incredible.
It's
88 a bottle.
50% Chardonnay, 30% Pinot Noir, 20% Old Vine Pinot Meunier, and here's the kicker: 70% of it from the 2012 vintage, and then 30% is based on a Solera going back to 1986.
Which means different.
Yes, so
they just
kind of
keep pushing it.
The Spanish
year.
idea of Solera and
Right.
fractional blending,
Right.
and so you have a little bit of every vintage from 86
So it's got a lot
until
of
2000
depth, complexity, and all of that.
Yeah. So
All right, so let's color. You have a little deeper than a light straw.
Sure.
It's got a nice yellow.
Yep.
Nice sized bubbles. Talk to me about the nose.
the nose here, you get. I mean, obviously the
Little
the
bready
kinda,
to me.
Yeah. You got a. Then that's that kind of Solera kind of coming through, and a little bit more aged wines. But you have, I think, a lot of apple notes from the Chardonnay.
Yes, I pick up apple.
And then just that little. You have. 50% red fruit here too, so there's definitely a little red apple.
The Pinot Meunier is the red.
And that's Old Vine Pinot Meunier
Right.
and 30% Pinot Noir.
Do you think the old vine gives it a different character than if it was just,
Oh, for sure. It's
Yeah.
also it's Old Vine Pinot Meunier from Cuy, which is an area in the Côte de Blanc known for Chardonnay. So it's kind of a cool little thing
All
to
right,
have.
so do we like these wines? I like the
like 'em
Leonville
both.
Poivre. I think it held up well.
Yeah.
It wasn't an over-the-top crazy. It's a nice, good representation
Sure.
of Bordeaux, essentially.
Definitely.
On the
Don
champagne,
Gruyere.
the Don Gruyere, incredible value, right?
Yeah, very much
If
so.
you had to pull out of your hat retail,
Sure.
40, $50?
I'd say just north or south of 40.
Okay, so that's a great value for this quality and all
Definitely.
of that. Quickly, we got to wrap up. I'm getting the high sign. What would we pair the Bordeaux with? Steaks?
Heavy. A half bottle like this, we could have a burger.
Right, perfect with
Yeah,
a burger.
definitely.
And the champagne? Classic
Anything.
and out of the box? Anything. The answer is anything. Fried chicken,
Fried
pizza,
chicken, popcorn, pizza, oysters,
Do the oyster thing.
raw bar.
All right, that's the bell
Playing
to
us
wrap
off.
up.
They're playing us off.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up. If you have a question, wine happening, or event, hit me up at Sam at the Grape Nation. That's Sam at the Grape Nation. Follow us on Facebook at the Grape Nation. We'll post Jeff's wine list answers, and I'll list our 2 weekly wine sip selections on the site. Follow us on Instagram at SBenRuby, Twitter at BenRuby, and check out our new website we launched, www.thegrapenation.com. You'll see a picture of a very handsome Jeff. You'll see his wine list answers, the wines we drank, and some information. Jeff, where can we follow you and North End Grill on social?
Sure. Yeah. On Instagram, it's at VinoJeff, at North End Grill NYC.
Okay.
Twitter is at VinoJeffTaylor.
Okay.
And at North End Grill NYC.
So Jeff's around a lot of cool wines and people and all that, so he's a fun guy to follow, so follow him. And for great wine experience, great chef Eric Korsch, grilled foods, very well thought out wine list, think about the North End Grill. So Jeff, thank you for coming in. We
My
had fun
pleasure.
with
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you to our engineer David sitting in today and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm going to give you our last pitch for our summer fundraising drive. We're at the end of it. We need more money because we have a matching partner, and we're very close to that. So Jeff, I know, doesn't like this, but go into North End Grill and buy a cheaper bottle of wine and give us the rest of the money and donate it to heritageradionetwork.com/donate. Thank you again, Jeff.
.org.
.org. What did I say?
Com.
All right, so it's heritageradionetwork.com/donate.
.org.
Why do I keep saying
All right,
.org?
go.
I'm sorry, David. heritageradionetwork.org/donate. Don't screw this up because of me, all right? All right, thank you again. I'm Sam Ben Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.